Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Rebecca. I'm the Business Development Manager at Green Key Global. We're the hotel and lodging industry's sustainable certification program and choice in North America. Our suppliers, APTIM, are going to be talking about zero waste in today's presentation. Goal to zero waste, discussion of waste reduction. Before we get started on that, I would just want to go over a bit of housekeeping quickly. First of all, your participation is encouraged throughout the session. At any time during today's webinar, please use the Q&A feature to ask your questions. Please use the thumbs up icon to upvote questions in the queue, which will help us get to your question more quickly. Finally, we will be recording today's session and it will be available on demand on the Green Key Global website. So today's session is focusing, as I said, on waste management, which is a huge topic when it comes to sustainability. We will discuss the importance of it and learn what is driving the industry to focus on reducing waste and driving it towards a zero waste goal. We will also be going over the importance of waste data and where to obtain it, as well as best practices for hoteliers to begin their goal to zero waste. I literally can't wait. Now I would like to introduce our guest speakers today. We have Patty Taves, APTIM's Waste Minimalization Business Leader, Amy Martinez, Client Program Manager with APTIM's Compliance and Permitting Division, and Christian Detman, Client Relations Manager for the Hospitality Industry within APTIM's Compliance and Permitting Division. Those are long titles. But without further ado, let's hand over. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the introduction. Welcome everybody. We appreciate you joining our webinar today. Again, our focus is to discuss waste within the hospitality industry. So let's go ahead and let's get started. Our agenda today is going to be just a quick introduction of who APTIM is. We'll go through some objectives and our areas of focus specifically in regards to waste. We'll review some best practices and then talk about what's next to come. So APTIM is based out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We are a large environmental consulting group with over 4,000 employees throughout the organization. We have 55 offices located around the United States, as well as a few international offices as well. Our core services focus in regards to critical infrastructure, technical and data solutions. We have our environmental team that focuses on everything that we're going to be talking about a little bit today. Our program management group, of course, our resiliency group, and of course, our sustainability and energy solutions team. So our objectives today are to educate you as to why waste is important within the industry, give you a little bit of insight of understanding the specific trends within the hospitality world, how to get started, and again, best practices within waste. And then we're also going to educate you a little bit in regards to some waste certification that's available. So let's discuss as to why sustainability matters within hospitality. Specifically, our leisure travelers are looking at more and more sustainable practices being done within the industry. According to Booking.com's recent sustainability report, 83% of travelers think that sustainable travel is vital. 73% of those travelers would be more likely to choose an accommodation that have implemented sustainable practices. And within that same survey, 81% of travelers are wanting to specifically reduce general waste during their travel. 78% of travelers are looking to reduce energy consumptions, again, through their hotel stays. Last on this list is our booking revenue channels that are making this a standard. If we take a look at the screenshot over on the right-hand side of the slide, this was taken just last week. I thought it'd be interesting to see how many hotels in Myrtle Beach might be sustainable. Booking.com has this great new filter that allows you to select sustainable travel properties What I found very interesting here is when I did my search, you'll notice that out of the 1,400 properties, only one hotel was actually listed as a travel sustainable property. Now, if you aren't familiar with Booking.com's travel sustainable program, it's a program offered by them and for their partners. It allows you to display your sustainability practices to potential guests and earn their travel sustainable badge. If your property is a partner with Booking.com, I encourage you to sign up for this program. And no hotelier wants to miss out the chance to book an event or fill their rooms or win an account because their facility doesn't have any sustainable practices. So just like the leisure traveler, your corporate guests are now searching for a more sustainable hotel or location. And this could be mandated by company travel policies in place that will allow those corporate travelers to keep their scope 3 travel in scope. For sales teams completing their annual RFP requests from Fed rooms, the 2022 RFP had specific questions asking hotels about their electric vehicle charging stations and reduction of single-use plastics. Other questions if the property has included organic, fair trade, and/or sustainability source ingredients. I've got a question here. Rebecca, go right ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add briefly there, Christian, that with Booking.com, we actually send every Green Key members certification level to them automatically. So they will be part of that program. But thank you for
fantastic. No, thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate you chiming in and sharing that information. Wonderful. So that's great. There's also some states that have some new continuing programs like the Florida Green Lodging Program. This is a statewide program that actually mandates state employees to stay at a certified green lodging hotel. So out of the 3,700 hotels within Florida, only a third of them have actually gone through that process. Again, great opportunities here for other hotels, maybe partners of the Green Key global members that are on this that are in Florida who might have some colleagues in Florida who are not a part of that program to get certified to get into that program. And then, of course, March of 2022, the SEC has released a proposal for new rules requiring companies to disclose their risks related to climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. So outside of guest demand, we do have climate change drivers. Currently, 30% of all waste sent to landfills is organic waste. As these organics break down, it creates methane emissions, which is classified as one of the super pollutants out there. To give you a quick example, if we were to divert food waste from landfills, it'd be like removing 2 million cars off the road. In addition to climate change, we have a food insecurity problem throughout the United States. It's expected that 34 million people in the United States are food insecure and don't know where their next meal is going to come from. And then, of course, we've got the drivers for guests looking for more farm-to-table experience, looking for that more local sourcing and local experience with food on site. Now, to share a little additional information on waste, this is a story that was released in August in the LA Times. 8 Ritz-Carlton properties in California were included in regards to this. What happened was the California district attorneys had scheduled unannounced dumpster audits for these properties. And what the teams found were batteries, electronic devices, flammable liquids, aerosol products, and cleaning agents not disposed of properly. And in the words of hospitality, they found broken TV remotes, used sterno cans from the F&B teams, and half-used cleaning products that, again, were not disposed of properly. Each of these items have specific locations that were supposed to be disposed of properly, which led to these larger fines. So I wanted to give a quick mention in regards to what some of the examples we are seeing throughout hospitality and the benchmarking that's being done throughout some of these organizations. You'll notice that some of the goals are to reduce landfill waste by 45 to 100%. Other goals are to reduce food waste sent to landfills by 25 to 50%. They're looking for 100% elimination of soap to landfill, and of course, 100% elimination of single-use plastics. Some of the other goals that are out there, and I know Green Key Global is part of this, is to ensure that 100% of managed hotels are actually certified through some sort of a certification program. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn this over to Patty, let her discuss benchmarking waste goals.
Thank you, Christian. I appreciate it. So when it comes to benchmarking, simple changes have a huge impact. Don't underestimate the list before you. But because of time constraints, I'm just going to briefly highlight 4 bullets on this slide. First, water bottles. At many properties across this country, water bottles are frankly frowned upon by more and more guests. Speaking from my past work experience in a large hotel and resort, if you're not getting guest complaints about plastic single-use water bottles, you soon will. Not only that, guests leave them half empty or empty everywhere around properties. They litter them all over the place. And frankly, with labor shortages, nobody has the staff bandwidth to constantly be picking them up. Solution: filling stations and your logoed refillable bottles for sale right next to those filling stations. This eliminates the guest single-use water bottle complaints. Guests don't leave them lying around for your staff to have to pick them up. And it removes the back of the house management of half empty or empty plastic bottles. It demonstrates your property is environmentally proactive, and it provides a new source of revenue. Next, bulk shampoo, conditioners, and soaps. I can't recommend this simple change enough. If you're in California, you're already familiar with AB 1162, banning single-use containers of shampoo, conditioners, and soaps. Beginning January 1st of 2023, if you're a 50-room property or more, fines start at $500 and escalate up to $2,000. Again, whether you're in a regulated state or not, chances are buying in bulk will benefit your bottom line and demonstrate to your guests your environmental acumen. Next, organics and food scrap diversion. If you're living in California or if your property's in California, you're already been impacted by SB 1383. Oregon, Washington State, and other states are moving to divert organics from the landfill to reduce, as Christian mentioned, methane air emissions associated with burying organics. Little warning, if organic diversion hasn't hit your state yet, it may soon. Plan now for a smooth transition later. Next up, and finally, food recovery and food waste tracking. Back of the house should not be ignored. In many states, food recovery can be written off on taxes. Tracking food waste is not only good for the environment, but it's good for your bottom line. Understanding your food waste stream and how much it's costing you will send a clear message to your chefs. Fix the problem. Is your team over ordering? Or maybe your plate portions are too large. Bottom line, these simple changes can have huge impacts. Next slide. How to get started, analyze, audit, and create a plan. When it comes to an audit, there are 4 things you need to think about. First, evaluate collection containers, interior and exterior, the sizes, pickup frequencies, and right sizing. By that, I mean, are you paying for air in those containers or vice versa? Are you overflowing? Next up, audit materials exiting the building to the landfill, to the recycling material recovery facilities, and in some cases to composting facilities. Don't forget the special waste handling and hauling. as Christian mentioned. That could be food donations, it could be electronic waste, it could be hazardous or universal waste. It varies depending on state. These items be eliminated upstream so you don't have to handle them downstream? A perfect example of this is fluorescent lighting. In many states, you cannot landfill them because they contain mercury. By simply switching to LED, they can be landfilled or recycled depending on your location, usually a much less expensive management option. And LEDs last longer. They provide better lighting, they use less energy, which again is good for the environment, smart business, and benefits your bottom line. Number 3, review and evaluate highest and best use of materials. Now, by this, I mean take a close look at the waste you're producing. Can the waste be removed further upstream? For example, like we've discussed, bulk products, no single-use plastics, hand dryers in your bathrooms, your public-facing bathrooms, instead of paper towels, so you don't have to deal with and pay for their downstream management. Regulation, are you compliant? Do you thoroughly understand federal, state, and local regulations? Are you following waste diversion bills that are queuing up at the federal and state level? I can't stress enough the importance of being ahead of regulation and not blindsided by it. Next, analyze. 3 things to think about here. Find someone to compile a report of the audit findings and recommendations. Remember to review hauling contracts, procurement contracts, and service records, looking for areas to reduce waste and costs. Measure current diversion performance to establish a baseline, and finally, set goals and then create that plan. Prior to adoption, get stakeholder input and support, whoever your stakeholders are. Then share the new policy plans and goals, and finally adopt a waste reduction policy, plans, and practices from the top down. Make it a priority. Next slide, please. Waste audits. As we've discussed, and you can see here, there are several benefits of a waste audit and how it can help your organization to minimize your footprint, improve system efficiencies, and thankfully save money. Oh, and just a reminder, remember to audit and examine your entire property or organization, not just the kitchens or public-facing spaces. Next slide, please. And with that, I conclude my portion of the presentation, and I'd like to turn it back over to Christian.
Thanks, Patty. I'll take it from here. So I just want to say, before I get a little bit further into what true certification is that everything that Patty just described is sort of foundational and fundamental to the certification. So, conducting a waste audit, having a zero waste policy, setting zero waste goals are all parts of the certification program. So even if after I go through these slides and talk about what true certification is, if it's not something that you're ready to explore, I would just kind of promote it in a way that it is a roadmap in many ways for following along in your own waste or zero waste journey. They set great foundations and fundamentals for things that you can do as an organization or as a property to improve from where you're at and where you'd like to be. So with that, I'll run through what true certification is. So TRUE itself stands for Total Resource Use and Efficiency, quite a mouthful. I think that's why they simplified it to TRUE. It's a comprehensive certification program that recognizes facilities, campus projects, portfolio projects, construction sites, and events for minimizing their resource consumption, for preventing waste, and redesigning their material life cycles so that all material residuals are reused in more of a closed loop fashion. It's typical that you'll hear around zero waste that we want to move from a linear, so a create, use, destroy mentality, where we're creating this closed loop system of being able to reuse, redesign, upcycle our materials within the process to have less waste as an end product. The organization that backs this, it's administered by the United States Green Business Certification, typically referred to as USGBC. And it's a complement to the LEED program. So many of you might be familiar with LEED. You hear LEED certification around buildings, which go beyond just waste goals. That can be in the construction side and also in the O&M. So USGBC developed True sort of complementing what they had for the LEED green rating system. And again, it was developed as this leadership standard to recognize those that go above and beyond to achieve their zero waste goals, that are making positive impacts through their property and their management. And that impact is both on their people, on the environment, and on the economy, both locally and more globally. True certified spaces are considered environmentally responsible, and they must achieve a minimum of 90% or greater overall diversion rate for their specific project. And project's the terminology that's typically used when describing True. It focuses on helping businesses. This could be properties like hotels, it could be industrial sectors, schools, government buildings, any type of operation that has waste generation and sees an opportunity to reduce their overall footprint. It works with those organizations to track the flow of your material and the outputs, helping you redesign your overall production and your distribution of your waste streams. The rating system overall can help you rethink how your resources are used. So as I mentioned, the True certification requires at least a 90% diversion from waste to landfill and waste to energy, but it goes beyond that. That's sort of just the foundation. And I'll talk a little bit later about some of the other certification requirements. But these points can be achieved in a variety of areas, things like reduce, reuse, redesign, as well as training, developing your zero waste purchasing and zero waste goals, and even innovation. What I like about the True certification is that it's truly customizable to your specific property or your specific project. Next slide, please. So True is, as I mentioned, sort of this closed loop circular process. And the end goal is to obviously achieve zero waste, which is defined through the True process of that 90% or greater diversion. But to get there could be quite daunting if you are just starting off, or maybe you're not fully measuring and tracking all of your different types of material streams. This could be your recycling, your landfill waste, your compost. It could be, again, your purchasing, your food donations, even your construction and demolition debris, and your hazardous waste if you happen to generate it. So that in itself seems very overwhelming. So you have to start from a sort of intentional planning process, right? Deciding if you want to pursue a loftier goal around your waste management. And perhaps you just need to figure out what you're generating and how much to then figure out where you're going to go. We always say you can't manage what you can't measure, or you can't, yes, that's right. So you have to measure it if you want to manage it. So the first thing is to start with intentional planning, and from the top down, get your leadership involved to create your goals, your zero waste goals, and the policies that you want to set that are property specific, or maybe more portfolio specific. If you have multiple facilities that are under your purview, you might attack this from a bigger portfolio wide perspective, but setting those policies and then implementing them. And what's unique is that that is fundamental regardless, again, if you pursue the True certification, because you can't go through figuring out where you have potential to improve your waste process until you start with a goal and then those policies and procedures. And many of the credits that you can achieve through True are tied to developing specific policies around concepts. So for example, you can obtain a credit by ensuring that in your purchasing policy that you only purchase a certain type of recycled content paper for your offices. And by having a policy statement that says you're only going to purchase X% or greater recycled content, you can then achieve a credit point. So some of the credits within True are very easy to implement or very easy to pursue. And in many cases, you might have some of those in place and already be able to check off the box that you have several of these credits. Once you've created your policies and procedures, it's that incremental progress on your diversion. So now you're starting to calculate your monthly diversion as far as where all of your waste is going, how is it generated, where does it go to? And from having that baseline information, you can step back and think, where in your process are there opportunities for you to improve where you're at and where you want to go? I mean, 90% might seem like a great number for diversion, but little switches might easily give you 5, 10%, 15% increments of increase towards that zero waste goal. And it's a continuous improvement process. So if you're already at that 90%, that is fantastic, but there's still, again, that continual improvement to ensure that you can maintain that 90% or greater in your zero waste to stay within the True certification program. And just again, as a good steward to the environment, if you're not pursuing True, to maintain that 90%, having that sort of measuring stick to it year after year. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to briefly describe what it takes to go through a certification process. There's a lot more behind this, but we don't have enough time of the day in this webinar to explain the entire thing. But it's fairly simple in any certification. You're going to start with registering and paying fees. I hate to say it, there are fees involved, and they are, fees that are administered by USGBC. And once you register and pay your intent to go through the application, so you have your initial fee, you'll have to prepare an application. All of that is standard application process through USGBC, where you have the decision to either start as a pre-certified business, and I'll get into that in a little bit here, or pre-certified project or a certified project. Once you decide which path of the certification you'd like to take, you collect your documents, you perform your data analysis, you're working towards developing your policies, working towards achieving your credits. And then once all of that's complete, you fill out your application. There's some photo documentation that's required, and then you would submit that to USGBC for review. Currently, USGBC anticipates, and they say their average is a 3-week on your preliminary review of your application, up to a 3-week in your final. So somewhere probably in the 6 weeks at the fastest in the review, depending on how many applications they're reviewing at that time, and maybe up to 10 weeks if it takes longer. Once that process is complete, let's say they've gone through, there's no questions, or everything is 100% looks good on your application, your property would be certified, and you would then live under the seal of being a true certified zero waste business. This process can be overwhelming. It can take some time because obviously there's a number of credits that you have to achieve to apply, which we'll talk about in a second. And so APTIM, is a true advisor. So, there are companies out there that are true advisors, and what we do and our purpose is to sort of guide a business or a project with this whole certification process, from registration, collecting the data, pursuing their points, and so that by the time they get to submitting the application, that they're in a good position to be successful. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, there's a number of certification requirements, and there's 2 unique paths you can take as a business when you're evaluating if you'd like to pursue True. The primary one is just the traditional certification route. The secondary one is called pre-certification. And for pre-certification, the point there is to recognize projects which have maybe implemented some of the fundamental actions and policies to pursue True, but they're just not ready yet for full commitment to that 90% goal. So they're still working on it. But what GBCI is saying is that you're still a leader. You're still looking for initiatives, and you're tracking initiatives and moving in the right direction. So you can go the pre-certification route and still demonstrate that you're on the path to True, and that that's the end goal of being part of this program. And so you can see as a side-by-side comparison some of the main things that you have to achieve between the 2 and how they kind of differ. So as we've talked about from Patty all the way through my conversation here, is that zero waste policy being fundamental. And that's one of the fundamental minimum requirements of True, is that you have to develop a zero waste policy. On the certification side, there is that need to demonstrate the 90% diversion rates for your most recent 12 months of rolling data. Where on the pre-certification side, you don't need to demonstrate that you've hit 90% yet, only that you are tracking and have data to show where you're currently sitting at. Another requirement for both certification and pre-certification is meeting all local, state, federal regulatory requirements around waste and recycling. So they want to make sure that if there's certain, as Patty mentioned, SB 1383 in California, or other legislative actions that are driving the state businesses to operate in a certain way regarding solid waste practices, that you are meeting those minimum requirements for your regulations. Certification also requires that you do not have greater than a 10% contamination level for any material leaving a site. So contamination being you have certain types of waste in a different waste stream, and that is contaminating it, and therefore it's not considered clean. So if you are exceeding a 10% contamination level, if you're exceeding that, then you'd have to bring that down in order to demonstrate you can be certified. Submitting case studies is also a requirement for certification, where you're not required to do that for pre-certification. And then the big one is the minimum credits. So as I mentioned, in addition to the items on the screen, there are a number of categories. There's actually 15 credit categories within TRUE, things like redesign, reuse, compost, environmental purchasing, auditing, bin right sizing. All of these are different categories where you can obtain credits. And so in order to certify, you would have to achieve a minimum of 31 credit points out of a total 81. So there's 81 total points you can try to achieve, but you only have to achieve 31 of those points. When it comes to pre-certification, you only have to document that you are achieving 9 select credits, and GBC tells you which credits those are. It includes things like right-sizing your containers to make sure that you have the right type and size of container for each of your waste streams, having that zero waste goal, conducting a waste audit, and developing an environmental purchasing policy. So those are some examples of those credits required under pre-certification. Next slide, please. So one thing that I think is unique about TRUE is there are a ton of resources and case studies that are available publicly on GBC's website. And the types of businesses that have already achieved TRUE span a wide array of industries and sectors. And so there are existing hospitality partners and sites out there that have achieved TRUE or have achieved pre-certification. And so we just wanted to highlight today that this is achievable and that there are properties out there that have walked through TRUE already. So one example is the Hyatt Regency in Maui. And I just want to preface, this is just a case study that's publicly available on GBC's website. So the Hyatt Regency actually started as a LEED project. So they were pursuing the LEED Silver. And it's quite typical that you'll see someone sort of move from LEED and then they're in operation and want to have some certification process moving forward to just demonstrate that continued investment in their commitment to the environment. So they decided to pursue TRUE pre-certification in 2020. And what you see on the screen is some of the diversion strategies that the Hyatt pursued as part of their pre-certification. So quite simple, right? There's many things up here that are not that overwhelming. I mean, they might be depending on the size of your property, but simple concepts, which I want to kind of put out there that the credits, some of them are complicated, but there's others that are pretty simple to implement. So they did add recycling bins to their hotel rooms. They implemented 3-bin waste systems in all of their common areas to help with reducing contamination and improving the diversion between their wastes. They were able to contract with a local pig farmer to pick up their food waste. Since I guess on Maui, they did not have a commercial composting operation, but they were able to work locally with this pig farm for the food waste removal. They worked with their restaurant chefs to decrease portion sizes. And they did also conduct multiple physical waste audits to better understand the composition and nature of the waste stream coming from their property. They also in 2020, they undertook a pretty sizable renovation. And what they did, which I think is remarkable, is that they looked for ways to divert as much material as possible from the landfill. So this included furnishings and maybe artwork and beds, other things that they could liquidate. They also went as far as cast iron tubs that they were able to have refurbished. They worked with local plumbing companies for salvaging some of the copper. So really went out there on a limb and tried to figure how can we reduce our construction debris from this renovation to kind of comply or go alongside our zero waste goals. And they were able to divert over 2,500 tons of waste during that renovation in 2020. And I think that's really remarkable. So just one example out there. There's many more case studies, including other hotel properties that you can look up on GBC's website. Next slide. With that, Christian, I will turn it back to you.
Thanks, Amy. Great stuff. Yeah. So, to talk about these best practices that we have going on, Eliminate single serve plastics. Patty kind of mentioned that previously. Again, she also went into greater detail about reviewing your suppliers and the products that you have coming in. Is there any possibility to reduce the waste that's coming into your property before it even gets there? Again, sorting items for recycling collection. Amy kind of talked about that with some of the certification process. Getting your staff and your guests involved to ensure that there's proper collection being done throughout the entire property, not just your guest rooms or your public areas. Implement composting if you can. We were just talking yesterday with a client of ours that's looking at some sort of way to compost all their orange peels that they have throughout their fresh juice bar. So get composting in there, because it does create some great fertilizer for your landscaping for, around your property. Look at just your front desk. Eliminate any sort of waste that's just generating there. Can you move to digital email receipts? Anything that you can not print, move to a digital copy. And again, at the end of the day, create that culture for your brand, your property, and promote it and educate it to your guests. So I'm happy to say that we've got another webinar next week where we'll be talking about energy conservation and clean energy. Again, all of that focused on the hospitality industry. But we covered some fantastic topics today in regards to waste. If there's any questions that you might have specifically, feel free to type them into the Q&A section right now. You're welcome to email myself. You can get those forwarded over to our team to schedule a call if it's more direct. But please feel free to share your questions. Our team is happy to answer them today. I know we've briefly talked about kind of getting started, but Patty, in your past experience, what would you say is kind of the first thing that any company could go out there and do to just kind of get started? What would be the best bang for the buck, so to speak?
Good question. The best bang for the buck is probably is directly related to labor nowadays. Any ways that you can cut your labor costs, because number one, it's so difficult to get labor in the front door to show up to work, whether it's from COVID or I'm sorry, I just found another job. Even temporary, temporary agencies are struggling to get people in the front door to help you fill your vacancies and gaps. So if you look at anything that causes you more labor when it comes to single-use plastics, or like I mentioned, having air drying hand towels inside the bathroom as opposed to having your staff have to empty paper towels, again, it just saves you money and headache in the long run.
Fantastic stuff. Thanks, Patty.
You're welcome.
Don't be shy, folks. You're welcome to ask any questions. I know, with all of you being Green Key Global members on this call, there's always that opportunity to increase your score for the following year. So these are great ways to implement and get things moving to that next level within Green Key Global. So looking forward to seeing that. So
Christian, can I jump in real quick,
yeah,
just add on to what
do.
Patty said? Yeah, so I think one of the ways that I would probably start is really trying to understand your points of generation and what you're generating. I think when I've been out at properties and met with various hotel engineering directors, and we've walked their resort or just their, the hotel. It's even eye-opening for them, sort of opening dark closets and hallways and discovering they either purchase certain types of materials or they generate certain types of waste that they just weren't aware of. And so I think, creating that baseline and understanding, okay, housekeeping, and they have this, and they use these chemicals and they do this, and then going over to, engineering department, and what does engineering do, and what types of waste do they generate? What types of materials do they use? So truly understanding each type of generation point within your property. And then from there, you can see, well, maybe they don't need to order all of those paints. We went to one property and they had so much paint because they didn't have a policy around procuring paint. And if a facilities person needed it, they went out and bought it. and they might have used it for a quick touch up and it went on the shelf. And so I think really understanding what you're doing now, which might be a little overwhelming or uncover, take some of those skeletons out of the closet for you. But then I think it creates that foundation to say, okay, where am I going to start? What seems to be the biggest low hanging fruit, or that, that dangling carrot that I can start with to maybe see a return. So that's just another suggestion of what I would do right out of the gate.
And Amy, that's a really good point. Sorry to speak over you, Christian. That's a really good point. And we have a lot of people who think they know what is heading out the back door, like Amy mentioned. But when we do photo documentation of what's actually in the bins, and a lot of times, honestly, sometimes it's air. They're paying for air over and over and over. Half empty bins, a quarter empty bin, or completely empty bins. And when the truck pulls up and empties, it doesn't matter if it's empty, full, quarter, half, whatever. It's really important that you take a look at what's going out the back end.
That's great stuff. Yeah, I was going to mention a part of that as well, Amy, with regards to the paints, is ensuring they're also being transported to wherever they need to go properly, right? Not having a director of engineering say, "Oh, I'll be happy to take those to the waste dump myself." You've got to transport that properly coming from your commercial business. Amy, I'm going to put this question over to you, and it's Ben is asking, how many criteria are linked to food waste in the TRUE certification?
That's a great question. So I don't have the exact number off the top of my head. I apologize. I don't know. Every 81 credit isn't memorized. But I will give you some examples of some credits that do apply specifically to food. So within the reuse category, so what TRUE does is they have sort of hierarchy buckets. So under reuse, 3 of the 7 reuse credits are related to food. So one is about reusable and durable food serviceware. So again, that is kind of related to single-use plastics, but also food. They have a credit around donation of all food safe for human consumption. And the third credit is participating in animal feed programs for inedible food. So that would just be a very quick touch on one category of the 7. There's 3 that are related to food specifically. I'd have to dig in a little bit deeper to each of the 15 categories to probably total up the number specific to food, but I know there are as many others in here as well. But hopefully that gives you a little taste of some of the things related to food specifically.
That's great. A question came in that said, what would you recommend hoteliers do to encourage guest participation in their zero waste journey? And, I'll speak from experience. Just a couple weeks ago at a hotel I was at, the breakfast of the hotel had compostable breakfastware, and everything was compostable. It could have been sorted and put into a separate bin. However, what was happening is they didn't have any sort of signage that was properly placed next to the waste bins in their breakfast area. So nobody in their guest, in the guest breakfast area knew that that stuff needed to go into a separate sorting bin. Instead, everybody followed along and dumped everything into just the landfill waste bin instead of separating it out. Patty, do you have any other suggestions that might work well other than just additional signage and training?
That your scenario is cringeworthy because, again, all those compostable organics could be diverted and not produce methane, because once they're buried and capped, they produce that methane gas. So diversion in that case, just having, like you said, that simple container right there with appropriate signage is helpful. Oftentimes, people, when they come down to the front desk and they're asking for something, I've seen staff hand out, let's say it's something as simple as like, I need an extra bar of soap, and they hand out more than an extra bar of soap, right? By just training your staff to ask, did you need one? They're small bars or whatever it happens to be. Again, this is in the case of single use. Did you need more than one? And the guest can choose yes or no. Another great option is inside the rooms. having the signage that please let us know if we need to change your sheets daily. Please let us know if we need to change your towels daily. Again, this has to do with labor resources and water, laundry, soap, etc. Just simple things like that can make a big impact on your property. And people appreciate it when you say, we're trying to save water and we're trying to save resources to keep costs down, maybe even say that. Keep gas price in appropriate levels.
Absolutely. Great stuff. Amy,
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, along that same line for what Patty said, and I know some states already have state policies around this, similar to the asking for the bars of soap. So they're sort of indirectly, you're supporting the guest in implementing a program by not providing them with the straws, not providing them with the ability to take 50 napkins when they need one, not providing them with the single-use food serviceware. So in those cases, there are states already where you have to ask for the straw, you have to ask for the cutlery. So if you don't have the option maybe right now to switch to a compostable serviceware or reusable serviceware, it's taking it sort of away from their ability to take more than they really need. So sort of limiting what they really need. And then maybe you don't need the straw after all, but because you handed it to them, they took it and created a waste. So they can indirectly be involved with the program by you sort of creating some programs on the back end that sort of puts them in a channel of making decisions for them. I also think with the bin system, we look at a variety type of events and venues and properties and industries and look at their types of containers, but do a property walk and look to see how far apart your containers are. They say that typically 25 to 30 steps between containers and public spaces is an adequate distance before someone will just inadvertently put the wrong item in the wrong container. So making sure if you have in the lobby spaces, do you have enough number of containers and the right type of containers to direct the behavior that you're looking for from your guests. If you only have containers for landfill waste, well, they're going to walk around with that water bottle or whatever it is, the food, and they're going to only put in that container. So making sure your containers are co-located and then making sure that they're available so that each guest is empowered to make a good decision because it's right in front of them with the right bins and the right signage.
That's great. Bethany is asking, if your staff are not responsible for transporting themselves, how do you source proper transport in smaller markets where this is simply unavailable and or cost prohibitive? And I Bethany, correct me if we're wrong, but I think that's going back to what we were talking about, maybe the paint transportation, but even going all the way back to that slide with the fines that hit Ritz-Carlton, part of that was with regards to illegal transportation of product. So Amy, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So if this is very specific to hazardous waste, and again, Bethany, feel free to chime back in if we're heading in the wrong direction. But for hazardous waste, there's a few options. So one is obviously having a program on site to manage it correctly. And then after that, because you will 99% of the time need to partner with a waste vendor that is trained and authorized to take waste for you. They are allowed to transport that waste over highways and can get it to the right place for final disposal. I know, as you pointed out, Bethany, that's not always an option in some markets that, perhaps you have limited resources and vendors that can provide that service. There are a lot of national vendors out there that do a pretty good job of providing it. But in addition to that, this is sort of like a nuance in the regulation that depending on the volume of waste in which you generate, there are kind of tiered categories of waste generation. So if you generate a lot, you're considered large. If you generate a little, you're considered very small. And for generators that are very small as far as how much they generate per month, there are some limitations to allow them to self-transport, depending on your jurisdiction, to a household hazardous waste collection facility. Again, that waste still does need to go to a proper collection point for final disposal. And it will vary by locality and state requirements. But if you are a very small generator of, let's say you have, a gallon of paint you generated this month and maybe a few aerosol cans, there are ways for very small generators to self-manage that material, filling out some forms and dealing with that locality in the event that you're not generating a lot of waste and that you don't have the ability to hire and work with a larger waste vendor. So I say that just cautiously to make sure that you're aware of your local requirements. But again, depending on your scenario, you might have some different options to pursue.
Yeah.
And then adding on to that, Amy, in many states, when it comes to paint care is now up and running. So you can actually directly reach out to paint care. Even if you're a large quantity generator, they'll come to your door, pick it up and recycle it at no cost. So just another option. You can look up paint care and it'll give you a list of all the states that they're operating in now. And maybe, hopefully, keep your fingers crossed, they're operating in your state.
And we were talking about this same sort of item with a client of ours, where they were concerned about their smaller markets and how their smaller markets who don't have access to this, how they can handle that. And this is a collaborative effort. If you are in a small market with maybe only 3 or 4 hotels in your area, look to those other hotels to partner together on these specific items, to then be able to go to a national account and say, yeah, we might only be one property here, but we have as a collective 4 or 5 hotels that are all happy to participate together as one. So definitely opportunities down the line. What other great questions? This is good. This is a good conversation. Patty, I don't know if you see that, but paint care is not available in Bethany State. So unfortunately, no progressive programs in that market. So that's okay. It's coming down the line as things progress. So it will come down, you know, within the next few years. Let's hope. So. Well, we'll go ahead and say thank you again for your participation. Rebecca, as always, we appreciate being a part of the Green Key Global family and being there for all of your members on this lovely journey. Hopefully we provided some great insight from both Patty and Amy on their professional journeys as well. So we look forward to our next one, Rebecca.
Yeah, thank you again for leading us through this really helpful presentation on food waste management. It was really eye-opening for me as well. As mentioned today, this session was recorded and it will be available on demand at Green Key Global's website with all of the links or any links that you shared with us today. So thank you to our guests for taking the time to join us today, and I hope the presentation answered questions you may have on the topic and brought some helpful information to you. We have another webinar next week, October 19th at 2 p.m. is on the screen, on energy conservation and green energy. I hope to see you all there. And in the meantime, everyone have a great rest of your day. Thank you.